All right, welcome everyone. Obviously a couple of minutes to go, but welcome if you're joining now, getting settled, have that cup of tea, ready. Lunchtime for some of you, morning time for some of you actually. So welcome if you're joining from the US. Welcome Catherine, Sophie, Suzanne, Mike. I won't keep doing that. If you are there, I've popped a little question and you're just waiting. Just start to get in the mindset of what we're going to be talking about for the next half an hour or so, which is around the human experience and why it's critical for this organization. There is a questions box. Pop your questions in. If you can hear me, maybe just do a quick check that everyone knows where the questions box is. I'll keep this as perfect. Natalie, you can hear. Mike, you can't hear. But Natalie's got everything into the questions box. Thank you. If there's anyone else that can pop something in, just to let me know that you can all hear me, that would be great. Maybe where you're from, why you're here, what you want to achieve from the next half an hour. Good to have you with us, and I will kick off very, very shortly as soon as a few more people have joined. I can still see a lot of you are still joining. Welcome Stuart, welcome Victoria. Nigel, welcome. Sophie, thank you. From Guernsey today. Thank you, Catherine. You can hear me too. Wonderful. Nottingham. God, we've got people from all over the place today. This is really great. Well, thank you for joining and giving up a little bit of your time. Hopefully it's useful. Keep the questions. It seems like everyone can find the questions box because there's loads coming through. I'll try and keep on top of things as I move through this. If I haven't, I will go back through this anyway and send through some answers, or we'll post something on LinkedIn afterwards. So apologies if I miss anyone. I will try and keep on top of everything. Hi, Jez, welcome. Thank you for your words. All right, well, I'll get going then, because we've got roughly 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but I'll try and keep it quite swift. I am going to be moving quite quickly through everything, but we will share the recording so that you've got it. One of the purposes of this is so that you've got a sort of a toolkit for your business case or something to go and talk about or have a meeting about afterwards. So do have a think about what the action is for you as a takeaway from this. I put a little question box there around why is this critical. Just have a little think while I do a bit of the intro in terms of why, what do you want to cover today? What do you really want to be learning and taking away, and what questions might you want? I'm an open book today. So my name's Anthony. Just as a quick introduction, those of you who don't know me, I'm head of strategic partnerships here at Bailey & French. I've got a background in psychology, but also been applying organizational psychology, positive psychology into the workplace for around 10 years. So I've got some stuff to talk about. But let me just move us on. And today we're just going to have a quick peek at the data. We're going to peek at the data. We're going to make the link to some of the strategic priorities that I know some of you will be focused on. And then we're going to discuss what to do about this, because it's all well and good knowing some of this stuff, but I've taken a look at a lot of the data out there. I've looked at all the workplace trends from McKinsey and Deloitte and Gallup and all of those places that you'd expect. I've kind of brought all of the themes together and focused it through the lens of the human experience and what it all really means. So let's look at the data, let's make the link to some of those strategic priorities, and we'll discuss kind of what you can now do about it. I'm hearing that some of you can't hear me, but I can see some of you can hear me. So I think there's a bit of a mix in terms of who can hear me, but hopefully you can catch the recording. If not, I will continue for those that can hear me. So what are we seeing? What are we seeing? Again, this is taken from a load of different sources, but the kind of key themes that I doubt you'll be surprised by, right? There's a lot of people doing a lot of work in a very fast-paced and changing environment with a lot of complexities inside and outside of the organization. And ultimately what that's doing is leaving people feeling quite fatigued. They're fatigued by change, they're fatigued by the amount of work and effort, and everything feels very hard work. Even the easiest and simplest tasks, because of a new process that's been put in place, or you're working for a new organization, or the organization's just trying to do something a bit different, change the culture, improve the pace or the performance of everyone, things are kind of just feeling a little bit difficult than maybe what they would normally. 76% say that they feel frequently or moderately highly stressed at work. 73% say that they feel unattainable workloads and kind of overwhelming workloads are the reason that they're unhappy at work. And interestingly, 41% of people say that they're performing. Now, this is a really interesting stat to me, but essentially what it's leading to is 90% of companies not hitting their objectives. There's a lot of companies that are, but a lot of people are feeling, and there's a lot of messages that I'm hearing from CEO level and kind of senior leaders, we want to improve performance, we want to improve pace, but people feel a little bit unfocused and disconnected, or they're underperforming. Interestingly, when you look at the stats and you really kind of delve a little bit deeper, 26% of leaders feel comfortable leading remote teams. So maybe there's something in there about how we're setting up our organizations with all of these changes. There's some really cool things on the right hand side there, and apologies that it's maybe a little bit small, but the one that I wanted to highlight is not feeling heard by leaders or a lack of recognition. These are some of the things that are high up on the list, but number one is employee burnout and heavy workloads, which hopefully can be addressed, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the coming kind of sections. And the knock-on effect of this is that people want to leave. Now, interestingly, there is some stats that suggest otherwise, that actually it's a tough market. People would rather stay put in their stable job rather than go elsewhere. So what you end up with almost this quiet quitting, which everyone's heard of, but almost worse than that, you end up with highly disengaged people who don't want to leave, but they don't want to work, and they just end up being in this mismatch middle bit, causing more disruption and conflict. But what I really wanted everyone to take away from this, because no matter what data you look at from people that we speak to, and we're working across public and private sectors, all of the clients that I speak to, the large majority of people want to improve, want to do well, want to thrive at work. There is this disconnect in terms of the environment and the experience that is being created for people right now. And that's really what I wanted to focus on in this section. I've got a few questions coming through. Hopefully all of that makes sense. Yeah, some of you still struggling with the sound, but I'm also hearing a lot of questions coming through. So apologies those who can't hear me, but I am going to continue just for those who can. Apologies, you'll have to catch the recording or something. And I love this from Deloitte, so let me move on. But I love this from Deloitte. And I love two bits in particular, because the first bit is welcoming the fact that we've got this incredible amount of change. And with change comes a kind of infinite amount of possibility. And we'll talk about AI and some of the kind of changes that are really impacting this. But instead of maybe seeing it as chaos and confusion, maybe we can just take a breather, take a step, and just recognize that this is infinite possibility in what's in front of us. If we can just create the right environment, if we can just challenge some of the ways that we're working, challenge some of the workloads that we're putting on to people, and kind of reshaping the way that we do things just a little bit. I'm not saying rip it all up and change everything, because we're already very fatigued with that, but just change some bits and create that more human environment, that more human experience where human beings are able to do the things that they are brilliant at. Be creative, be adaptive to change, focus on that ability to come up with new ideas and act incredibly quickly, be agile, get excited by having the connections with other people who share similar values and purpose, and have that direction to move in together, and don't feel like even just the simplest of tasks are incredibly difficult. This is what is the operating model of the future. I think a lot of people strategies I'm seeing, as I've already mentioned, a lot of people strategies are already doing this, but let's start seeing companies make an effort, not just to say people first, but actually our operating model needs to be this and include some of these things that we're going to talk about today. And the benefit and some of the things that I would love you to go forth and share and spread and put all over LinkedIn and do whatever you need to make senior leaders kind of take notice of this and to really discuss it in more depth. There is overwhelming evidence, and if you need any support with your business case, come, we're more than happy to help you to do that, because I can totally appreciate that when you put these numbers in front of it, it's not your organization, and it can be hard to see some relevance in the data, but the impact across absenteeism and productivity, profitability, you name it, there is a competitive advantage waiting to be taken advantage of here. And yeah, Jez, you're absolutely right. This is all post-pandemic. The reasons for this we've kind of touched on, but now is the time, and I think everyone is starting to realize that. Certainly, people strategies that are noticing it. Let's call it out from an operating model, because the link is incredibly obvious when you look at the data to some of the key kind of strategic priorities which businesses are talking about and focused on. Any conference that you go to, I'm going to talk about 4 of the major ones that I've been hearing for the last kind of 6 to 8 months, and trying to bring that link to the human experience. All right, I'm seeing a few questions come through, but I'm also noticing that I've maybe answered them. But if you feel like I haven't answered them, please do put stuff in the questions box. I am watching it. All right, so the link, and what do you think the first one might be? When we talk about the human experience, we are really focused on the human skills, right? You can't have a human experience without focusing on human skills. And for an organization, these are the superpower. This is what I'm talking about. We need humans and the people in which operate in our environments to have all of these things. And Bailey & French has just launched a new catalog which focuses on all of these as key learning outcomes. But there's many, many more. And the reason that these human skills are so important, particularly the growth mindset and the self-awareness and resilience, is because of things like AI. Yes, I've already mentioned AI. I'll probably continue talking about it. But actually, funnily enough, Bain & Co did a recent study, and it showed that kind of 8% of organizations could find some sort of return on investment when it comes to any sort of digital transformation, let alone something as complex and as kind of far forward as what AI is, and forever changing on a daily basis. So how are we really going to do something slightly different than what we've done in the past? How are we truly going to get an environment where people are feeling able to have that growth mindset, to operate, that psychological safety, but also psychological bravery? These things are really, really important to help people to continuously improve. And again, this is about the operating model of the business. If you don't have teams and individuals continuously having the appetite to learn, and we're all different, right? We're all in different stages of life. We're all in different kind of motivations and different kind of cultures and different ways of wanting to work. But the one thing that we can adopt, and as I said right back at the beginning, the assumption has to be that people want to do well, they want to thrive, and they want to achieve things. These are fundamental, kind of those of you who know the PERMA model, that achievement and that positive emotion and the kind of connection with others when you're achieving as a collective can be incredibly powerful. And actually what we're seeing is that people are not finding that comfort from outside the organization, right? Actually, a lot of human needs are met because they go to work. So when we start to talk about the strategic priority of AI, that is definitely a really important piece of the puzzle for me. How do we elevate people's ability to have a growth mindset. We all know what it is. We all know about psychological safety. If you don't Google it, there's so much out there. How do you practically bring it to life? And then building on that, so there's a really interesting piece of the puzzle here whereby managers are micromanaging and becoming increasingly ineffective, especially when working remotely, because of all of the kind of uncertainty around what are you performing? How are you performing when you're at work? How many hours are you really doing? Or are you sat at, with your feet up? And we know throughout the pandemic that probably wasn't the case, but there is a question mark, and Microsoft studies, have shown that drops in productivity. We see a lot of organizations making a call to come back to the office. And even if it's just a kind of proximity thing where you want to see people just to connect and be closer to them, and therefore you're more likely to promote them or to support them in their career objectives. I get all of that, but actually one of the major things, and this was highlighted by a recent KPMG article as well, there's this kind of analytics thing that AI is going to be able to do for us, which is around reporting and this productivity kind of mania that will set in otherwise, whereby we just close the gap in terms of intention and action for a manager. Managers will have complete clarity of exactly what's going on, and so they won't need to have that fear that people aren't doing their job, because people will be doing their job, and you'll be able to very clearly see it. Microsoft Dynamics and all of those types of tools are very good at creating some of those metrics and making it very easy for managers to report on. What I hope this does is I hope it helps managers to remove that fear, create that psychological safety, focus on the more human aspects of leadership and management, and will actually just, AI therefore will help human beings do the things that human beings are great at, connecting, be authentic, and you won't have all of this kind of loss of productivity, loss of inefficiency, etc. as a result. You won't have all of that conflict, that manager and employee kind of disgruntlement or lack of trust that we hear so much about. I can see from the comments a lot of people are kind of agreeing with some of this. Please feel free to challenge some of this. And I know I'm not touching on everything AI. I'm just giving a few flavors to why the human experience is important for this strategy. And I think if people don't start to move in this direction, there's no way we're going to be able to maximize the potential of AI. And ultimately, that is a real risk to the survival of a company. So that's number one. Let me move on because I'm conscious of time. But number two is diversity, and I know there's a lot out there in terms of ED&I strategies, and I know there's a lot of ideas of why that might be the case. But I think the fact that we can all agree on is that most companies, especially public organizations, are striving for a more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable organization. And I think there is a lot of research now coming out about the impact on shareholder returns, particularly in tough times, reduced costs, all of those kind of business metrics. But of course, there's also a moral and kind of ethical reason as to why people need to be doing this. But again, coming into how and where does the human experience play into this? Essentially, a human experience is going to help you create a more inclusive and diverse workforce that people want to come and work for. There's so many initiatives out there trying to tap into different talent pools, trying to onboard the right types of people into the right types of roles and give those opportunities, which is fantastic. But what we are seeing is there's a huge amount of kind of leaving. And certainly the exit interviews and things like that, some of the data that I've been seeing is that, yes, we're doing okay, but we could be and we should be doing a lot more. Greater self-awareness, greater awareness of having people to be felt and heard and understood throughout their journey, from interview to onboarding right the way through. Performance management is often a really big and contentious one here. When you dig into the depths of the detail of some of the reports, the McKinsey one in particular, you can really uncover what is the impact of not having some of these human skills and this human experience on varieties of different kind of inequalities and different populations across a workforce. And it's really, really important that we create that safety, that sense of belonging, and that curiosity. Globally, and this kind of data I think comes from McKinsey, and this graph, if you look into the recent 2023 kind of workplace report, you'll see it there. But the best thing the company can do is be diverse, and almost one of the best strategy to becoming more diverse is to create that more human experience. I will move on. ESG, sustainability, strategic priority number 3. And again, there are other priorities, I know that, but I'm just trying to make the link here between the human experience, and ESG is coming up probably more so than it ever has done, certainly in my career, in my time. I think there's some brilliant stats from PwC recently around kind of, this is a $33.9 trillion market by 2026 in terms of just the amount that's going to be invested into ESG, and ESG as a concept. 88% of public companies have ESG initiatives in place. But interestingly, and this was from the recent Deloitte kind of global human capital trends, if you haven't read it, it's a great read, but just to kind of bring to the forefront of one of the things that came up in that is that just 21% of people say that their organization is ready to achieve these objectives. And actually only 30% say that they can change it even if they wanted to. And Deloitte have done a really great study that's kind of showing the key reasons that people feel that way. And the link to the human experience is because this is all about culture. This is all about leadership capability. This is all about being ready and open to change. Having this polarized workforce is slowing everything down. Having different ideas, wokeism and those types of phrases that come into it. And if you don't have that psychologically safe, human, authentic kind of experience, as we've already talked about, everything that we've said right back at the beginning with those human skills, if you don't have those human skills in place, what you're seeing is a much reduced ability to achieve your sustainability and ESG targets. 79% of people, by the way, agree. So don't just take my word for it, but 8 out of 10 others think the same. We need to develop more mindsets and the skill sets to empower people to make decisions and to more positively impact not just the people side of things, but the planet in which human beings thrive, and to create a future where we this is the opportunity to make some of those changes. So that's a tiny part on such a big topic of what ESG is, and there's so much more to that. I'm sure we'll probably do another webinar just on the topic of ESG at some point, and get some people in who are focused on this, because it is a hot topic. But the final one is a really interesting one, because we've worked with a lot of marketing brands, we've worked with a number of public organizations, including public sector, but also just large brands, and this is probably not new. As much as, let's say, ESG has become a little bit more of a hot trend, and AI, of course, in the last couple of years, but human branding has probably been about for as long as that you might think, and there's been a lot of research from Kotler and the likes in terms of the humanizing marketing approaches. But what we really are seeing, and you see this if you look at any of the good adverts that are out there, if you look back at any of the John Lewis adverts, Christmas is around the corner. I know I've just said Christmas and it's only October, but there's so many brands, Nike, that are doing these sorts of things and acting in this way and have been for an awfully long time. I think that the importance, though, is if you're not doing this now, that's the problem. I think before you could maybe get away with it. It's okay that you weren't acting in this way. But actually, when you start to look at Google, the year in search, I don't know who's geeky enough like me to be looking at the year in search every year. But the 2020 video, I think, really established that. And I think, the pandemic certainly had the impact of that. You know, this example from Burger King, saying order from McDonald's, you know, taking a really human approach to their communications, be highly inclusive, highly transparent, you know, be incredibly purpose-led and mission-led, and create that kind of very deep and emotional connection with their community. This has got to be number one. And my argument to this is, how on earth can you have a human approach if you don't have a human experience kind of as an operating model as a company? And again, I really would urge, people first is not the same thing. People first is a nice tagline that a lot of people are using. Creating a human experience is a lot of hard work, and it's about creating those human skills that we talked about right back at the beginning, and investing an awful lot of money into leadership development in terms of personal development more broadly. First line leaders, first, you know, future leaders, you know, you name it, it needs to be across the organization. But you'll start to see the returns, especially from these 4 strategic priorities that I've chosen to highlight. So, what can you do about it? Because I'm conscious I've been talking at you for 25 minutes. You've probably finished your cup of tea by now. If not, you've walked away and got your cup of tea. Maybe you were bored at some point of that. But these next slides, if you just stay with me, I think are the most important ones, because what we've done is we've gone, okay, this is what the data is telling us. This is maybe some of the client kind of stories and priorities that people are really focused on and we hear a lot of. But what can you actually do about it? And I'm going to take you through what this means for leaders, what it means for teams, and also what it means for recruitment. And then I will leave you alone. Jez, good to know you're still here. Thank you for your comment in the questions box. So what does it all mean for leaders? I think this is quite an interesting one, because of course leadership development will get the vast majority of investment. It's already getting the kind of human leadership is already a tagline. Gartner were doing, you know, pieces on it, and of course Bailey and French have launched all of their pieces around human leadership. The first human leadership program that I've seen that includes kind of coaching and the online piece, the blended workshops, etc. So there's already a lot of talk about how do we create a more human leadership approach, and some of the data you've already seen in terms of this. But what we do know is that consistently creating these role models who are championing these more human ways of working. What do we mean when we say human? I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle, and one that we often get asked. We have a definition. We know it's about authenticity, it's about inclusivity, it's about creating role models, and it's about creating these little human connections between people. But I think a really important piece of the puzzle that people need to be thinking about as a company is, well, what does human look like for us? For our size of organization, for our industry, for our, you know, strategic priorities, what does human really need to look like for us? What does a human experience look and feel like? And spend a bit of work, you know, thinking with senior execs, shaping that vision, because I don't think it's the same for everyone. And encouraging that sort of experimentation to lean into these approaches. It may feel a little bit uncomfortable. It was when we were talking about employee engagement, you know, back in the 70s and 80s. You know, that felt strange, because why would we need to do that if the way that we've already been operating is incredibly successful? Well, actually, this is a new age of work, different types of working environments, different people in the organization who are living incredibly different lives with different pressures than ever before. So let's just lean into some experimentation and try some new things. And I guess the more that you do that, as you go through and as you try and influence this kind of human experience, leaders really need to be deepening that human connection. And with that comes, you know, you cannot be having a more human, we talk about, you know, turning the switching the human on, you know, becoming more aware of when you're not being human. And I think if any of my team are listening to this, they know that this week has been particularly pressured and challenged in a number of different ways, and it's incredibly difficult as a leader to stay switched on. in terms of keeping that human vulnerability and authenticity, but almost that is the time to double down. The only thing that I would say is that workload and those pressures, you cannot do that if you're operating at 100, 110% all the time. People need space to step back, consider, am I being human here? What would the human approach be? So I think working at pace is great, but maybe, reduce those work practices from back-to-back meetings, just to give yourself 5 minutes to go, okay, what does being human need to look like in this next meeting? When I make the decision in this meeting and when I communicate this out, how can I make the communications as human, as transparent, and as inclusive as possible? Because if you're not putting those checks in place as leaders, you're gonna find that there's a bit more of a backlash than maybe what there would have been even 5-10 years ago. And then for teams, because it isn't all on the leader, right? We're seeing a lot of this where 22% of managers feel that their well-being is taken seriously, and they're really struggling. Leaders everywhere are burning out because they are, the front and center. All the accountability comes to them. They're facing change and challenge themselves. They're burning out more than ever. And actually, I think more onus needs to be put on teams and more development needs to be given to teams. There's a lot of leadership development, and I know getting teams together and away days and those types of things are still going on. But actually, I don't think that's helping. I think what we need to do is get teams together without their leaders and go, okay, so what are you doing to support the leaders? What are you doing to support their well-being? How are you strengthening the awareness and appreciation of each other's unique strengths without a leader being present? How do you as a team lead yourselves? And how do you create purpose and meaning? How do you turn up on a Monday together and help maybe someone that's been onboarded as a new member of staff to think about these truly human things that help you feel like you belong in an organization? Who's having those deep and meaningful conversations? Because it can't just be the leader once a year in that appraisal conversation to make you feel like you belong. Actually, a lot of the research says that a person's engagement is all about the interactions and the daily interactions with their team. So how can we do more to help teams adopt these human skills? What is the mechanism to kind of help these teams do this on a daily basis as well? And again, despite incredible pressures and workloads. And this is an interesting one because I don't think we've touched on recruitment too much in some of these webinars in the past when we've been focused around leadership and performance and well-being. And I think recruitment is such an essential part of this puzzle when creating a human experience. There's some really great stuff happening at the moment in terms of how can you hire people who naturally have these strengths and skills and capabilities for creating a human experience. And I think more work needs to be done to explore that. Bailey and French, we've got the process internally to help people to recruit in that way, to train managers to onboard and have an onboarding process that does really focus on human experience and the little ways and tools and techniques to do that, even in really complex and different environments, everything from restaurants to prisons to you name it, we've worked on it. So if you've got any questions, do let us know. But I think what's really interesting is that you create a human experience, and again, that will mean very different things to all types of different organizations. But for example, the language that you use in job descriptions, your careers page, are you using words or are you using a video? Even a video is a lot more human and can be a little bit more kind of accessible to a lot of groups. So just thinking about your approach, how can we make that more human? How can we make that more human? And that needs to be the mentality as you look at your strategy for next year, as you look at some of the changes. There are obviously ways to make efficiencies and do things in a different way operationally with recruitment. I love the data that you can pull from recruitment because, as I said earlier, I am a bit of a geek when it comes to this stuff. But actually, fundamentally, if you just ask the question, how do we make that bit more human? What are we doing there to make that more human? Did that feel human? In your evaluation process for interviews, do people feel strongly connected to the people that they were being interviewed by, regardless of whether they got the job? Were they focusing on their unique contribution? Were they deeply, genuinely interested in the human being rather than just trying to fill a job role? These are really important kind of experiences that people will have. And what I would like to see is the more people that do that, what's the link then to them going into the organization and knowing that's the culture that you have? I was treated this way at interview, therefore, you know, my onboarding is exactly the same, and this is brilliant. And my manager's being a little bit more kind of human and bringing that human experience to life just as I experienced. So what do? I'm obviously going to go forth and kind of that becomes your culture. And again, part of the operating model and just how we do things around here. I think it's really, really important. And finally, kind of looking at recruitment, because I'm conscious I've talked a lot, but focusing on skills is one thing. And I know there's a lot of people focusing on kind of the skill strategy here, but also focusing on strengths and factoring in a more strengths-based philosophy into the recruitment is incredibly important, so that people feel like you're going to be factoring in not just their experience, but also their diverse and unique ways that people can do the same job. You know, there's a lot of research at the moment saying that jobs don't exist. It's all about hiring people for skills and their ability to be agile across departments and do different kind of jobs or roles at different times, and how to move them about based on their different skills. But what they're really missing is the strengths bit. Are those people going to be energized and excited by doing that role? And if you don't have some sort of way of helping people to identify and communicate and kind of articulate what those strengths are, that can be a problem. So yeah, definitely needs to be something to factor in if you're looking at recruitment. Conscious of time, and I said that I would keep it between 30 and 45 minutes. So that's everything for this kind of moment in time. Here are a list of resources and references. If you need anything particular, do reach out to me on LinkedIn or email me or get in touch with the team. I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction. As I said, there was a lot of reading and kind of things that went into this. There will be a resource that goes out with a little bit more detail. These are the slides that I've used today are kind of the high level summaries, but I'll be launching kind of a more detailed version of this. And also, I'd just encourage you to go and look at some of the things that are already out there. There's some really, really great work on this that's being launched. I've highlighted a few of the books that I love and can highly recommend. There's a few other ones. Amy Edmondson's obviously brought out her recent one on psychological safety, and that is phenomenal as well. There's a lot of great books. I think even Adam Grant's launched one today, or is going to be launched very shortly, around kind of hidden gems and how to get the best from people, and I'm sure that's going to be an excellent resource. But don't forget, Bailey and French as well have free downloads, free blogs and articles and webinars like this one. There's also a lot on the shop and the YouTubes, and please just follow us on LinkedIn if you do nothing else, because we're going to be continuously evolving this. As I said, we've just launched our human skills kind of catalog. There's a lot around human skills that we'll be launching in the next 6 months. So please just yeah, have a little look out. Give us feedback if there's anything you don't see or you want to hear more about. Please get in touch. Otherwise, I will leave you alone to the rest of your day. There's loads of ways that you can get started, and I will leave us on this page just so you've got it there. But otherwise, I am done. Unless you've got any questions, you're all on mute at the moment, but put your kind of questions in the questions box and I will answer where I can. Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Jez. Thank you, everyone. I can see you're dropping off slowly but surely. Really appreciate you taking the time. hopefully useful. How do I use AI? Great question. Not to write this webinar, otherwise yeah, not to do my dissertation either recently, although the spell check was definitely useful. Thanks, Natalie, appreciate it. And those of you who are still around, don't forget we've got a strengths discovery session coming up. We're actually relaunching the updated and new version of that very shortly. Thank you to Oriana, who's in our team, who's working on that at the moment. All right. I think enough of you have logged off. That makes it okay for me to log off. So I will love you and leave you. And thank you for joining. I will share everything, and this will be on our YouTube page very shortly. Thanks very much.